going on, guys? This is Cade Lamb, and this is the Fear Not, Do Right podcast. Today, I have an incredible opportunity here, not just to sit with, the mother of the Navy SEALs, but a Gold Star family member, and, what most would consider a modern-day saint. Debbie Lee, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's awesome to have you here.
It's awesome. I don't really come out to the West Valley that much, but being able to come out and even just see all the relics, I don't even know how you'd call it. Like, they're so...
Yeah, military memorabilia, maybe.
Well, there's just a holier feel to it, like a special feel to what you have going on. So, like I said, Debbie, you're a Gold Star family, and that... people don't know how much that means. That's... You owe your entire life to families like that. If you're a listener and don't know what a Gold Star family is, it's a family member or a family that lost a service member. And I can't imagine anything harder.
Yeah, it's not everything you want to be. And I didn't even know what a Gold Star family member was till I became one. And but it's one of those things. My son made the choice 3 different times on his final day, stood up in the line of fire, willingly gave his life so that we could wake up every morning and enjoy the freedoms that we do in America. And if by Marc giving his life will change this world, which it has done, it's my honor then to carry that title because of who he was and the choice that he made to give his life. And, one of the things I say all the time is we need to live our lives worthy of those sacrifices. And people don't understand. Fortunately, Marc has had, movies, lots of books, documentaries told about his heroic actions. And so a lot of people know who Marc is and know not just how he gave his life, but how he lived his life every single day. And the choices that he made that drew so many people to himself, his humor, his love. He would be there for the underdog. If someone was getting picked on, he had no problem standing up. He didn't care what anybody else thought. You talk about the right thing to do. He knew it was the right thing to do.
So for those who aren't familiar, would you mind telling us a little bit more about your son, like who he was and what kind of set you up to become Momma Lee?
Yeah, so my son, Marc Lee, was the first Navy SEAL that we lost in Iraq, August 2nd, 2006. And if you saw the movie American Sniper, there's 3 main characters. First one, obviously, Chris Kyle. It's his movie, his story, his wife, Taya, and then Marc was the next main character in that movie. So in the funeral scene, when Chris and Taya are at the funeral, that's supposed to be Marc's funeral, and that's supposed to be me reading part of his amazing last letter home. And I would encourage all of your listeners to go to our website at americasmightywarriors.org and read that powerful letter. He was 28 years old when he wrote that. It would end up being the last letter that we would receive from him, but it was not, he didn't write it to be, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you can just sense in there the things that he saw in the combat zone that changed him so deeply. He talks about so many things. He talks about the amazing country that we live in and the obligation we have to keep it that way. He talks about doing more random acts of kindness. He said, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or meal or tank of gas? He talks about a hospital that he was in over there that most of us wouldn't even go into because we couldn't stand the smell, let alone get help or medicine from in there. And he ends that letter with, to my family and friends, do me a favor. Pass on the kindness, the love, the precious gift of human life. And you see that contrast, one of the toughest warriors that we had in America, and one of the most caring, compassionate, kind men. And I know we walked through the heroes room a little bit before we started the podcast, and I read you some of the things that Jocko and Leif had written in the book there, and it wasn't anything that I did. It's not like I went through a thought process and okay, these boys need some help, they need some support. Marc's gone, I can't change anything, I can't do anything to bring him back. But I knew when I talked to them on the phone after I'd been notified, I was concerned for them. I can't make decisions. I can't think. I can't process anything, but nobody's firing on me. Nobody's trying to kill me. So my decisions weren't life or death situations at that point, but theirs were. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so Leif talks about this often, you know, when he called thinking he's going to give me encouragement and be there to comfort me. And I got on the phone and I'm like, how are you guys? What can I do for you? I'm praying for you. How can I support you? And it was just something that I knew, again, was the right thing to do. They're the ones that we needed to be concerned about. You know, he tried to explain to me the brotherhood before he died. And I know you and I talked about that a little bit, but, you know, I'd say, I get it. You know, you're close to these guys. You've, you know, trained hard with them. You've gone into combat with them. I get it. You're really close to them. But I'd say, as close as your brother you grew up with for 28 years? He said, yeah, Mom, that close. And I would just chuckle and say, well, let me remind you, I didn't birth them. They really can't be your brothers. And kind of left it at that. And then the week he died, we had 5 of his teammates in our home. And the light bulb went on. I was like, oh, my gosh. They love Marc as much as we do. And they're hurting just as much as we are. And that week was when they started calling me Mama Lee. And I was very protective of that name. Only his brotherhood, the tight ones, you know, could call. If you didn't know Marc very well, you weren't a close buddy, sorry, you don't get the honor to call, you know, me Mama Lee. But you weren't, you know, what I felt like wasn't one of his close brothers. And then I learned, you know, through our foundation and what we're doing for our veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, many of them suicidal. That was important for them to have that relationship like a mother with me. And they would tell me things that they probably wouldn't tell their own mom because they wanted to protect them. And I wouldn't coddle them. I wouldn't baby them. That's not what they need. You guys are warriors. You don't need me coming up saying, oh, I'm so sorry. Why don't you come lay down? Take it easy. Let me take care of you. No, you need the kick in the butt that says, okay, this happened. Acknowledge it. But come on, you know, put your boots on, pick up your weapon and stay in the fight.
Right.
And that's just something that, you know, God's kind of naturally put into me. And through the process, you know, the group that called me Mama Lee got bigger and bigger. And now, you know, if somebody says, who's Debbie Lee? They're like, who? Well, Mama Lee. Oh, we know Mama Lee. Yeah. Right. So it's an honor to have that name, but it's more of an honor to have that relationship, you know, that started in the SEAL community, that started with Marc's Charlie Platoon brothers, but that has grown, you know, immensely to so many, even civilians are like, we see what you're doing. We see that relationship and we've watched you. We feel like we know you as, you know, Mama Lee. I said, if you want to call me Mama Lee, that's fine. So, and again, that would not have happened if it wasn't for the choice that Marc made to say the right thing for me to do is to stand up in the line of fire. I may be giving my life. You know, it was 115, 120 degrees when that day in Ramadi, Iraq. They'd been in an intense firefight for 2 hours. I've been over to Iraq. I've been to the base that was near where he was killed. I wore the body armor. I went out on patrol. I felt the temperature briefly. But for them to do that for 2 hours, him carrying the big gun, anywhere from 150 to 180 pounds in that extreme temperature for that long, I can't even begin to imagine how that happens. We have watched our Navy SEALs do amazing things, and at times they seem superhuman to us. But, man, those are my boys. I know them well now, and they're just as real as you or I are.
It's amazing. Sorry.
That's okay. No, go ahead.
It really is amazing to see what that bond is actually made of, because a lot of the times it comes across as like, hey, if you don't do this, you're gay. Like if you like, that's what comes out. Like, hey, if you don't do this, like you suck. Right. Carry the gun. There's no such thing as heavy guns. There's only weak arms, you know? Yeah. And there's that brother, like that competition. But I was so fortunate to experience it a little bit just recently, when I got married in March. And
congratulations!
I had a bunch of my guys that I had deployed with actually come out to my wedding. One of my best friends and former team leaders, and you know, we'd done it all together. And he actually rode his motorcycle out from North Carolina straight just for my wedding, and then rode back. That's a trip. And then rode back. That's the crazy part.
Wow.
And it looks like that on the outside, and you see this dude who's like, you know, that cloth breeds some pretty wild individuals, as you know, and
all tatted up.
But when you see that, like, you get to know what the little jelly's made out of on the inside.
They're pretty soft, yes. Pretty tenderhearted inside, yes. Agreed.
So what was it like, and how did your perception change of what it meant to be a military family before Mark had died and afterwards being a Gold Star family? Because that's a huge coin flip, if you will.
Yeah, it's a pretty big flip. And my oldest son, Christopher, served in the Marines. My son-in-law, Christopher, served in the Army. My brother was in the Air Force. Mark was a Navy SEAL, so I can do the hoo-yah, hoorah, hoo. And Air Force, what's up? You don't have a chance. So I had to make it up for you. It's jacuzzi. But and lovingly, I'm teasing. But you guys have amazing, in the Air Force, they have amazing chow halls, their accommodations, their rooms, their housing, their hotels. Oh my gosh, it's so much nicer. But we need everybody in their branch of the military to do their part. But so we were a military family before 9/11. All three of my kids were, their lives were involved in the military. And very proud of all of them and the choices they made to serve and to give. And I don't know the flip that happened didn't change my patriotism at all. I've always been a patriot, always loved America, always knew that there was a price paid so that we could live free. Now I just understood how much deeper and how precious that price is. And I worked really hard. Shortly after Mark died, we had Code Pink, the wackadoodle people, and Cindy Sheehan, the anti-war that, and she lost her son too, So I never wanted to, before I lost Mark, compare myself to her, but I totally disagreed with her. And after losing Mark, that was one of the things I'm like, now I know what it's like. And her son believed in the mission and believed in what we were doing. So how she could go against that, even that was her own opinion, you keep your mouth shut. You honor your son that has passed and you respect them. And so I wanted to make sure I always did that for Mark, that I never did anything that would dishonor him. But when I saw them spray painting the Capitol steps, anti-war stuff, I'm like, oh, heck no, this is not standing on my watch. Right. If I went up there and spray painted Mark's name and he's a hero and the date of his death, I'd be arrested in a heartbeat, as I should be. I'm destroying public property. But when I saw that and, Nancy Pelosi's like, oh, no, don't arrest him. That's freedom of speech. I'm like, that is not freedom of speech.
That's vandalism.
Yes. And so that's when I started getting real active politically and standing up for our troops. And like I said, I didn't sign up one day but my heart was enraged that would even happen. And I'm like, I want to show our troops that there are people out there that love them and care about them and support them. I don't want them thinking that this is what represents America when they look at Code Pink. And so I was up on Capitol Hill lots, did probably about 11 cross-country tours speaking in support of our troops and endorsing our conservative veterans who are running for Congress. And so got a glimpse behind the curtain up there in Washington, D.C. They tried to get me to run for office. I'm like, no, thank you. There's some things back in my closet that I'd rather didn't come out. It's not who I am now. It was 40, 50 years ago. And I really felt like my mission was just staying focused on our troops and what we were doing with America's Mighty Warriors, supporting our Gold Star families. And it's been such an honor. It's been almost 17 years since we lost Mark. But, man, that kid is still saving lives in such a crazy way around the world.
That's absolutely true, too, when you recognize how destructive some of the after effects of all these conflicts have been on service members, particularly those that really got after it, and even some who didn't. There's just this weird mind warp that happens in the military, whether you were in the thick of it and at a tier 1 level, or if you were just one of the support guys. I think it has to do a lot with like the sense of purpose and, like what your job is and actually getting out to having your purpose fulfilled. Yeah. But, the suicide rates right now are outrageous, and the substance abuse is perilous for all service members. Yeah. And it may not even seem like it's that bad for one or another, but if it's there at all, it's coming from that. And you can almost say that Mark was responsible for helping them, or going down the path to help them get the help they need.
My husband, unfortunately, committed suicide 29 years ago on June 1st. And so we had walked through that, and that's nothing. You don't ever want to have to do that. And I totally understand why our veterans get to that place, the pain that they're in, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, mental pain, or all of the above. I get that. And I get why they're self-medicating to try to get rid of that. But the suicide is not the answer. If they could see the pain that's multiplied to the family members, to the teammates, that one person, their pain may be gone that they're dealing with here, but now their families and the teammates, it just destroys so much more than that one circumstance. And our Helping Heroes Heal program, that's what we're doing. We're working with our combat veterans who do have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, a lot of them suicidal. And we're providing therapies that are actually healing them. There's so much out there right now that's just masking the symptoms. They go to the VA, they put on the drugs. 2/3 of those drugs that they're giving them for depression have side effects that say may cause suicidal tendency. And we wonder why our suicide rate's so high. It's unbelievable. They're self-medicating with alcohol or drugs. A lot of them are trying some pretty bizarre therapies, and a lot of them are doing the psychedelics. And again, it's not healing you, it's masking the symptoms. And the psychedelics, so many of them have experienced, now they're not an alcoholic and they have no desire for alcohol. That's awesome. But then they're microdosing the illegal mushrooms after they do the bizarre treatment down in Mexico. Right. So what we're doing with the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, the hormone and supplement therapy, are natural things that are healing them, not just masking the symptom. We've done SPECT scans before and after for a large number of our veterans who have gone through our program. We've seen the difference it makes. We had a Navy SEAL probably 4 years ago. I'd called, I was checking in after they're done with their therapies to see what's better. And he went through, he said, man, I'm sleeping better, and my memories, my focus and my memory are so much better, and I don't have any suicidal ideations. And he said, you saved my life. And I said, well, you were willing to give your life for me. Are you kidding me? This is a no-brainer that we help you. And he goes, no, stop. And I was like, oh, ruh-roh, he a Navy SEAL, man. That's probably not going to end very well. And he said, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for you and your foundation and the therapies you provided. And when he said that so boldly and loudly to me, I thought of Marc running the line of fire to save his teammates. I'm like, oh my gosh, he is still saving his teammates. And if our lives, us leaving this world, Marc was a believer. He's in heaven. He believed Jesus Christ was Lord and Savior, and I will see him again one day. And if we all knew that when we left this place, we'd make a bigger difference than if we were when we were alive, I would think the majority of us, there'd be some people that would be selfish enough not to do that. But if you're a good-hearted person, you're going to say, yeah, especially if you know where you're going, and there's no pain, no sorrow, no sickness when you get there. But again, that God says, I appoint the day you're born and the day you die. That doesn't mean you take your life and say, I'm moving on. But it has just been, I tell people all the time, because of my pain, I have the passion and purpose that I do now. And it has been an honor. I love what I do. I love to see the impact. I love to see the lives that are changed. And I'm a blessed woman.
That's amazing. What have you seen what have you seen on the front end that are bringing veterans to you?
I think the biggest difference that the veterans are coming to us are those veterans that have been through our program, that have received the healing, and now they're going out saying, oh my gosh, you got to go do this. Or their friends are saying, what is something so different about you? What happened? You're smiling, you're happy, you're not drinking. What's going on here? And so I think, even though there's some, that are team guys that I've known for a long time that I keep harping on them. Here's what we do. Let us help. You don't have to live like that. And it'll be one of their teammates and they'll be like, oh man, that's awesome. I need to go check that out. I'm like, did you not hear anything I've been saying for like the last 7 years? But I'm just like, come on in. We're ready for you. So, and again, it's got to be their choice and their timing when they are ready, but they don't have to live in, the pain that they're living in right now. There are things that they can do to change that. And we're here ready to help.
What kind of things are these guys coming to you with? Is it usually just like suicide and things like that, or is it just like guys who can't let go of the hate in their heart? Like,
I think, there's a lot of different things that bring them here. Sometimes they're not sleeping. Once they transition out, they've got more time to think about things. They realize that their memory, they're driving home and can't remember how to get back home, and that freaks them out. So then they're like, oh yeah, I remember Mama Lee telling me something about this. We need to reach out. A lot of them they had childhoods with a lot of trauma, and they never processed that. And I'd say that's probably a bigger portion of that, what we're seeing, those that are struggling, because you'll see some guys, the same platoon, same situation, saw the same thing. And some are okay and not struggling, and others are destroyed. And so I think when you don't process through the different traumas in your life, and then you put another trauma on top of it, and another one, then eventually you break. And so I think that's important then to be able to acknowledge that and work through those things. Obviously, what we do for our veterans is providing that healing. The frontal lobe of your brain is what controls so much of that damage from the blast wave exposure. That's what controls your sleep. That's what controls your emotions. So whether it's the raging emotions or the no emotions, I don't feel anything, I don't care, whatever, or the memory issues, that's all the frontal lobe of the brain. So when we get that healed, I had last week, I've been traveling a ton from coast to coast, and I had 5 nights of maybe naps. I don't think it was sleep. But on Thursday, I was trying to work. I'm like, there is no way. This brain is not going to produce anything that's good today. So I probably shouldn't focus on anything that's important because I don't want to screw anything up. And that was just 5 days of bad sleep, and I found I was more agitated. And, but I thank God even for that, because then I'm like, this is the reminder, of what you guys go through. So many of our veterans, I hear stories, and I'll say, when's the last time you had, 7, 8 hours sleep? And they look at me like,
why are you sleeping that much?
8 years, 10 years? Yeah. But I'm just like, oh my gosh, no wonder.
Well, I think it's a thing too, especially with the higher caliber dudes and those who are put in environments where they know how far they can stress themselves.
Yes.
I do this all the time, where I won't eat or I won't sleep, or I'll be so hyper-focused on something that I'm just like, I keep pushing and pushing. I know how far I can push myself. Yeah. I'm the worst at road trips because I know that I can pedal to the metal from coast to coast without stopping, without sleeping, like just
hopefully
going
there's no
for it.
Passengers in the car with you that are having to endure that too.
Well, they're fine. They just sleep the entire time. But it's that element of like pushing yourself so far and knowing that, like, I know I can do it, so I'm just going to do it. Right. There's no sense
just knock it out, get it done. Just knock
it out, get it. It's
I'll sleep when it's done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, there's been a couple of times where my body has started to kind of lash back at me for some of that. Like,
yeah, it doesn't like us after a while and says, we're not working for you anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You get us food or sleep or, something. And
And I feel like that's a lot of these guys where they know what they're capable of. They know how far they can push themselves. So these day-to-day tasks are mundane. They're nothing compared to...
It's no challenge.
They're nothing compared to, the X, Y, or Z that I went through and that all my buddies went through and that, my buddies died for. Like, my problems are of naught, but nothing could be farther from the truth.
Yeah. And so, to be able to, again, that comes back to that Mama Lee thing, to acknowledge the struggles that they're going through, to relate to them, and then say, okay, Mark's final words were probably on me. And you know what that means. He was saying, we got a mission up ahead. He was getting ready to go up the steps. I shared earlier that Ryan had got shot on the rooftop. He stood up in the line of fire with the big gun. He had the 50 cal. He knew he could lay down some suppressive fire. It's not like he stood up to, be shot and killed. But there was not a medic up there. So he knew he had to stand up. The other 2 SEALs dropped their knees to help Ryan. He could have done the very same thing. But how would any of them got evacuated? So without even thinking, he just knew it was the right thing to do. Stood up in the line of fire right where Ryan had just got shot. Laid down the suppressive fire. The medic got up to the rooftop, and he took one look at Ryan and said, we got to get him out of here immediately. So there's no chance for survival. So a second time, by himself, again, he stood up in the line of fire. His hope was he would provide that cover so they could all move down off the roof, and they did. They headed back to the base that was named, Camp Mark Lee in his memory, and I got to visit there in 2007. And I know Chris Kyle told me later they're pretty sure that Ryan couldn't have survived his wounds, and they were waiting for the hospital to call on that. They were getting some water to refresh themselves and taking their gear off. And the chief came in and said, "We just found 30 of the insurgents that just attacked us." And without hesitation, Mark looked at his chief and he said, "Roger that. Let's go get them." They've done their mission for the day. The other side of their base is a big Marine base. They could have called some Marines who were gung-ho ready to go and hadn't been out that day, but that's not who these guys are. And so as they headed back into that godforsaken place and they got in their Bradleys and they cleared several houses and they went in the last house Mark would be in. And they cleared the bottom of it, started up the stairs, and that's when they heard him yell, "On me." They knew there was probably somebody upstairs, and that wasn't something Mark could do by himself. He needed his team to be there with him. But he's saying, "I'm going to take the lead. I'll be the example. Let's go." And that's what that relationship with the veterans that we work with, where I'm saying, "On me. Come on, guys, let's go. We got a resolve. We got a solution. We're here to help. We're here to help you finish this mission strong." And so to be able to work with them, to challenge them, to give them, this is not going to be easy. There's a commitment on your part. While you're in the program, no alcohol, no tobacco products, no marijuana, no CBD, no illegal drugs. If you're going to destroy your body with those things, at the same time we're investing $20,000 into you to get you well, it's going to be a waste of our money and a waste of your time. You're going to be disappointed when you get done. You're like, it doesn't work. Well, it works, but you were destroying yourselves while we're trying to build it up. Come on, help me out here. So once we discern you're there, then I'll give them the kick in the butt. I'll make the challenge. This is not going to be easy. There's responsibility on your part. There's not a quick fix. There's not one pill, one shot, one treatment. There's things that you need to be responsible for, not you specifically, but our veterans, when I'm talking to them, I'm saying you, that they can do to get well and get better. Let's process through this. They've got so many great assets and they're so valuable and so much that they could change in society once we get them healthy. And we've been able to see that in so many of our veterans that have gone through our program.
Well, you've gotten quite the large assortment of sons now through, even just the team that Mark was with and Charlie Platoon.
Yep, Charlie Platoon, Task Unit Bruiser.
Yeah, those guys have, as you were showing me in your Hall of Heroes. If you ever have an opportunity to be in Arizona and come visit Momma Lee, the Hall of Heroes is, it's got a very sacred presence there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But amazing men. Yes.
Yeah. We were talking about it earlier where you have the most amazing group of guys who are probably ever assembled in some way or another. When you follow how many people and from that Task Unit Bruiser, what they were able to do afterwards and what they were able to do in country while they were SEALs. And
what they're still doing.
Yeah. Running huge companies and going to the moon and to Capitol Hill and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, like you said, there's so many more people like that out there that are just almost suppressed by.
They need their new purpose. They need their new mission. Yeah. And once we get them healthy and can get them directed in that way and resolve the trauma and issues that they've had in the past, give them the tools, to put a new tape in. Don't keep playing that negative tape. Don't keep listening, to your buddy's last words or the songs that remind you. Yeah, on the anniversary or something, take a little time to remember, but don't stay there every day, Yeah. Like I said, live your life worthy of their sacrifice. Don't give up. Don't quit.
It's bizarre how you don't really realize how destructive it is until you see it too. There was a guy I served with, and he kind of went through that while we were overseas, which was dangerous.
Yes, very dangerous.
Because there's not
just to them, but to their teammates and everybody else around.
Well, because there's no. You may think that it's very well regulated because it's the military, but if you are driven, you can get anything you want. And so all of a sudden we have this individual who had some responsibility, and all of a sudden substance abuse was rampant. And, the failure to pretty much function, was taken over, and we were all kind of left out. Like, just like, how are we going to do anything with this guy when we're in this combat zone and there's, bad guys and there's these stressful situations, and this dude can't get out of bed because he's remembering this date in Afghanistan years ago. Yeah. And, fortunately he's been able to get some help since then, but there's a lot of guys who are just out there suffering. Yeah. What is one of the things that you guys push out to these vets who are coming in to help them start getting on the right path?
Well, I think one of the things that I often talk to them about is, I try to speak their language. Not that I've ever been a vet, but I've been around the community for lots of years, so learned a few things. And, I'll challenge them and say, hey, when you were in the combat zone, did you have a day you were like, I'm not going to put my body armor on today. It's too hot to wear that thing. We'll be fine. No, that's ridiculous. Did you ever say, I don't think I'll take my firearm. My shoulder's really killing me, and that's kind of heavy, so I'll be good. No, you studied the enemy. You knew who the enemy was. You knew their tactics, and you put your full kit on every day. And you maybe put an extra grenade on there or something in case they didn't do plan 1, 2, or 3. You were prepared for whatever they'd throw at you. And when you come back home and when you get out of the military, you're still in a fight. And this could be the biggest fight of your life, and you still have to know the enemy. You have to know the tactics, what's going to be thrown at you, and you need to put your full kit on every day and be prepared for it. And just like you're saying, that means you can't have addiction problems. If you're in the combat zone over there, the addiction problems don't work. Well, you're in a fight back here. It's a different kind of fight. But those addiction things don't work back here either. So let us help you. Let us help you, get healthy and healed and back in the fight.
I think one of the other things too is like not being able to do that with a team and especially a team that knows who you are and where you've been.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we always talked about. I wasn't necessarily in a soft capacity or anything crazy, but everybody that I was around was someone who is going to jump out of an airplane with me and smack their head on the ground and then get up and then get after it.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. And we did that to the best of our abilities. And when you have people that you're around that, hey, I know that this guy is going to be my swim buddy, and we're going to be sucking down here in the dark. We're going to be sucking down here in the dark for a few hours, just kicking our feet.
Right. But I know he's right next to me.
But I know he's right next to me. He's right there next to me. Or, whether it's whatever it is.
Yeah.
Having that community and that, like, hey, I got this guy next to me.
Right. And I think that's important when we do the intake calls. Usually, I'll end those with, after we've gone through the whole program and our expectations of them and talked to them and, found out a little bit more that's in addition to the application, the information they've given us. I always stop at the end. And if they're struggling with suicide and we know that up front, obviously we're addressing that at the beginning. But if they haven't brought that up, I always say, hey, promise me if you get in a dark place, you'll call me. There's not anything you're going to say that's going to cause me to freak out, that's going to scare me, have me act irrationally. I will be here just to listen to you, to give you hope, to encourage you. And then I tell them, my husband committed suicide 29 years ago. And man, you feel the walls come tumbling down. They're like, oh my gosh, not only is this lady, the mother of an amazing hero who gave his life, but she does understand what we're going through. And so I think that's part of that mama-lee relationship, that tribe mentality, that I won't say I'm the mama of the whole tribe, but it's getting pretty big. But just to know that someone is there that will be there and will listen, that will give you hope, and will walk alongside you with that. And one of the programs, I've got a new program director for our Helping Heroes Heal program, and he was actually on Task Unit Bruiser with Marc. His name's Cowie Mayoral. We're going to be doing a Zoom meeting. We're going to start with once a month, but then work towards once a week, where it's a safe place for the guys in our program to get on, to vent, or to say, man, when I went through the program, here's what's going on. Oh my gosh, everything's, my sleep's better. I'm sleeping 7 hours a night. I've done that for, 2 months. My focus is better. I've got a new passion. I've got a new purpose. Or, hey, reentry didn't go too well. Here's what happened with my wife and I. What do we do with this? And just a safe place where no one else, just the guys that are in our program are on there, and they know on a regular basis they can jump on here and we'll be there. So
it's funny that you say safe place, because that has such a very strong association nowadays with all these college kids and these little weenies who they need the safe space pods and whatnot.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, they don't know what it is to be in a hard place. That's for sure. But yeah.
Well, especially when you're in a hard place because of such extreme things that people, especially nowadays, are not conditioned to being in.
Have no clue. Yeah.
How many guys have you had come through your program so far?
We probably had about 350 that have gone through our year-long program.
Wow.
And I think we're right about the 10-year mark.
So as far as
we've currently got 125 in our program right now.
Seriously?
Yes.
So what does your program look like as far as like going from start to finish in that 12 months?
So during that 12 months, once we have that intake call with them, then it's up to the veteran when they schedule their hyperbaric oxygen therapy. That's probably the biggest scheduling problem.
What is that? Hyperbaric oxygen training.
So they go
therapy.
in a chamber. So a lot of people, when you get the bends and you're a diver and you've been deprived of oxygen, then you go in the chamber and you breathe 100% medical grade oxygen in a pressurized setting. And what that does is that gets that to your cells faster and quicker and deeper. And that's one of the things that heals our bodies. You think when you cut yourself, how quickly, if you don't cover that up, how quickly oxygen heals that on the outside, and that's why God designed our bodies inside for the oxygen to heal that too. That's part of why we sleep every night, so we can regenerate. And but to see that change that takes place, it's 40 consecutive dives. So they have to then open their schedule to where, and most of our facilities aren't open on the weekends, so that's Monday through Friday. So that means 2 months of going every single day, and it's usually an hour and a half or so that you're at the facility. There's a few facilities, if they have scheduling problems, can't find 2 months, to be able to do that regularly, that they can go and get 2 treatments a day and knock it out in a month. But and I'm not a doctor, nor have I ever played one on TV, but doing this for this many years, personally, I think that if you can do a treatment a day for the 40, that your healing's a little bit better. But I'd rather see you, if that's going to stop you from getting in the program, than to do the 2 treatments a day and knock it out in a month. At the same time, we introduced them to Kevin Lace, who was on Charlie Platoon with Marc. He got out, became a physician's assistant, and is down in Pensacola. He worked with Dr. LeMay, and all they specialize in is just hormone and supplement therapy. That's all their practice does. And they work closely with a lot of the spec ops units as well. And that's who we refer them to. So then they get a year of that program. There's twice a year that they get the labs at the beginning and at 6 months to check and see what your body's short on. This is personalized to each one, not, okay, here's our TBI PTS treatment. Y'all take vitamin D, y'all take cortisol, y'all take, those are things that typically the stress depletes, but not on everybody. And so we want to make sure we're all unique individuals. So we're going to give you unique therapy that's specifically for you, for whatever, you need the help in there. We cover the labs. We cover the visits with Kevin Lace. We take care of all the supplements. If you've got a prescription, they, submit that to their insurance. If they don't have insurance, then we'll do a case-by-case evaluation to see if that's something we can cover the cost on that as well. But, and then we do retreats. We're getting ready to do a retreat here 2 weeks from today in Texas for our Helping Heroes Heal veterans and their families, so their spouses and children get to come in for that as well. We refer them to Mighty Oaks, which is another foundation that offers. Chad Robichaud was a Marine who was also an MMA fighter. And then when the debacle in Afghanistan, when we pulled out of there, he helped rescue 17,000 Americans and Iraqi interpreters that our government wouldn't get out of there. So amazing man who does that. They take care of the retreat. We cover the cost of take care of the flights. And then we help support the spouses as well. So Yeah.
Was that with part of the, what was it called? Pineapple Express?
It was, yes.
Yeah.
So, and he also, when in Ukraine, when we had the reporters that, I don't want to say they were with Fox, but they were, like overseas station. But they killed one of them, and there were 2 that were wounded, and our government wouldn't go get them. But Chad Robichaud and Dakota Meyer, a Medal of Honor recipient, went and got him. So
Wow.
he's doing amazing things as well, too. So, yeah.
So you start off with the oxygen. What's it called?
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy. You guys have retreats, and then after that treatment, what does the process look like?
So you mean after they've completed the year hormone supplement the hyperbaric?
So it's 40 days of hyperbaric, and then
Right.
you guys go on to like hormone and supplement
Yeah,
therapy?
or that could be at the same time.
Okay.
And again, it's up to them when they look at their schedule and say, so sometimes they can be on hormone supplement therapy for a couple months because our schedule isn't open to be able to do the HBOT. But then they'll schedule the HBOT. So it can be different for each individual when they do that. But yeah.
I feel like there's a huge... It's funny how there, you have all these macho dudes that are so low and messed up hormonally. Like their test levels are super low,
Yes.
and like their
That's what
thyroids
the
are
stress
jacked.
does to the bodies. But yeah, some of these guys have testosterone levels. They're 30 years old and have a 90-year-old man's testosterone level, and it really makes such a huge difference. Kevin tries to get their bodies to start producing it naturally, so they don't have to get on the shots. Because once you're on testosterone shots, you don't get back off. You're on that for life. So he tries to do those things that stimulate your body to be able to get you back to where. And he really is doing a phenomenal job. I've had several of our veterans who, called me later and said, "Oh my gosh, I've been seeing a specialist for 6 years and they can't figure out what's wrong with me." And I said, "One meeting with Kevin, and he told me exactly what it was, and I went back to my doctors, and sure enough, that's what was wrong."
Right.
So just by carefully looking at all your labs, and I know this because he started working with me before, we even started offering that as part of our program. And when I did my blood labs, it was a basic panel. It's like, well, some of the stuff was on the low side, some of it was on the high side, but it was still all in that normal range, even though it was barely. And the doctor's like, "Yeah, you're good." And he's like, "Did they do this test? No. Did they do this test? No." He goes, "So we did them," and came back, and he's like, "You have no testosterone." I'm like, "I'm a woman." And he's like, "You have no vitamin D." I'm like, "I live in Arizona and I walk outside every day. How can I not have vitamin D?" He says that stress depletes it. My cortisol was off the charts. And, I said, "Kevin, I'm not a stressful person. I don't freak out. I don't, have road rage or scream or yell or have panic attacks." He goes, "You don't respond to the stress that way." He said, "Look who you're working with. You're working with veterans who are suicidal and struggling. You're working with Gold Star families, and you're surrounded by stress." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that kind of makes sense." And I used to get bronchitis, and literally for 30 years, I would get bronchitis 4 or 5 times a year.
Really?
And I had a preschool and kindergarten. I just figured it's because all the germs were around me constantly. But I did have doctors that said, once you get bronchitis, that's your weak spot. When people get, any virus that's going around, you'll get it and get bronchitis.
Really?
I haven't had bronchitis in, I want to say 3 years. And gradually I'd get it once or twice. But even in the midst of COVID, and I did not get vaccinated, but I was barely sick. So once you get your body where it has an immune system built back up and will fight off that stuff, it makes such a difference. And that's why I was talking to him like, "Well, won't this work for our veterans?" Yeah.
So hopefully this isn't too crass, but there, when we were in Iraq, we started looking into a bunch of like test boosters because for some reason, like you said, with the cortisol and everything, we were starting to feel like, okay, we're on the low side. Like there's no way we're not on the low side.
Right.
And so we started looking into all these different therapies and stuff, like just how do we hormonally balance ourselves out? And we found a study by, I think it was Oxford University, and it was the effect of direct sunlight on your body and how it changes your test levels. And they said that about 15 to 20 minutes a day on your face, arms, and neck showed in certain cases like a 30 to 50% natural increase of test production to have direct sunlight on your chest and back, as well as, face, neck, arms, had about a 70 to 100%.
Yeah, because you've got
increase.
more space in your body that's absorbing that.
And this is what's funny is there was another part of the study that said direct sunlight on your nuts
was 100%, huh?
Well, had a certain cases of 200% of natural production.
But you think about your body, that's probably where the biggest part of the testosterone, my guess, like I said, I'm not a doctor, nor have I played one on TV, but
we tried it.
Ooh,
totally works.
Please tell me nobody got sunburned.
Totally works.
Yeah, that's crazy.
At least we felt it. It was funny because we were in a pretty remote part of Iraq. It's remote in the sense that like it's right in between Syria and Baghdad.
Right.
We had these camps, whatever, that we were staying out of, and the one right next to us, Cell Block C, we called it. There was no one there, and so we would take like some cots out, and they ended up getting mad at us because they're like, the
hopefully
base
they
commander,
weren't flying drones overhead.
They were. They had like this little balloon over top that,
They're like, guys.
They're like, hey, you guys can't be doing that. And we're like, doing what? You guys peeping on us? Like, what's your problem?
Yeah, what is your problem?
What's more weird, doing this or looking?
That's great. So it works. Okay.
The other thing we found was we all got really into beef liver and
Beef's
raw
good
milk.
for you.
Well, the beef liver, I guess, is like the most nutrient dense food you can eat.
Yep.
And raw milk it balances your hormones. Like it flatlines your hormones.
Wow, that's interesting.
So back in like the 40s and 50s, when you went to the doctor, when you went to the hospital,
They tell you to eat beef.
they'd give you beef liver and raw milk.
Wow.
Until you like kind of stabilized, and then they'd figure out what's wrong with you.
Wow, that's interesting.
Because if you have hormone deficiencies, you're gonna feel terrible.
You do.
Or if you have nutrient deficiencies, you're gonna feel terrible.
It makes such a huge difference when you get that back into balance where we were designed to be, so it really does. It's huge.
Do you guys have any diet programs with what you're doing?
We encourage them to eat a high protein, low carb diet. We have found in our research for brain health that that's the one that is the most effective for the inflammation and for the health of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. Again, we can't control that, but we encourage them to do that. We also encourage them to work out at least a half an hour intense workout a day. We've got a feel-good endorphin that's released when we do that. And I was writing an article, it's probably been 2 years ago now, and it was probably going to be published. So I'm like, I can't just call it a feel-good endorphin. So I looked it up, and it is just called an endorphin. But it said it can have the same impact as morphine. I'm like, dang, no wonder we feel so good when we do a good, intense workout without the side effects of, what morphine would do to us. But it takes that pain away, which in our minds, you're like, okay, if I'm in pain already and I work out hard, it's going to be painful. But there's something that happens that makes a big difference. And for me, one of my, things that I do, whether it's Gold Star families or veterans that are struggling and depressed or anyone, I said, wake up in the morning and before your feet even hit the ground, find one thing to be grateful for. And this kind of thought came to me, when I was grieving in the beginning, losing Marc. And I remember thinking, there's nothing. I got nothing to be grateful for right now. And the thought in my head was, do you have hot water in your shower? I'm like, well, duh, I live in America. Of course I got hot water in my shower. And because it was 2006 and we were, losing so many of our troops, especially in the Anbar province, and was thinking, oh my gosh, our veterans, a lot of them, if they're not on a fob, they don't even have hot water at all. They may not have water other than what's in their bags or their camelbacks or boxes, that they've got. And so I'm like, okay, thank you, God, that I have hot water in my shower. I don't know if I'll get up and take a shower, but thank you. And then I noticed later in the day I'd find something else that was like, oh, I'm really grateful I've got this or that. And there's something contagious when you start that mentality. I tell people to exercise. In the beginning, literally, I made myself do it, and I got up out of bed and walked to the end of my driveway. And I didn't live in the house I live now. The driveway was pretty stinking short. And seriously, it could have been more than 25 feet, but just getting up and moving. And then the next day, I'm like, okay, walk a little bit further. So I'd walk to the end of the block, which I was 2 houses from the end of the block. So, it wasn't very far. But I walk 5 miles a day every single day now. In the last 3 years, I have maybe missed 4 days that I haven't walked 5 miles.
Wow.
And I feel so much better, when I do that. And then I encourage people. And I just lost my train of thought. Get up, do that. Oh, and then serve somebody else. Whether it's walking somebody's dog, reading a book to a kid at the library or at preschool. You don't have to go start a foundation like I did, but do something for somebody else. When you're serving somebody else, you're not focused inward. And not that you do that to avoid, because you got to go through grief if you're losing. You got to get to the healthier side if you're struggling with depression. But those things start to make a difference. And you'll notice each day you feel a little bit better. The next day you feel a little bit better. You can walk a little bit further. You can do a little more, especially in the grieving process. You're not crying as long, and you can, make a difference. Maybe you had no control over the circumstances they're giving you. I had no control when they notified me that Mark had been killed. I could have stuck my fingers in my ears. I could have refused to answer the door, but that wouldn't have changed the fact that he was gone. But I did have a choice how I responded. Curl up in a ball and feel sorry for myself. It wouldn't bring Mark back. It physically make me sick. We just talked about what stress does to you. And that's not how God wired me. So if I can be out there supporting our troops and our Gold Star families, man, that's an awesome day.
And there's so many people out there who need to know that they're not alone. Like we talked about, you have to know that there's someone going to jump out of the plane with you.
Yep.
And they're going to meet you on the ground, and your guys are going to be able to go out together. With, it's something that we've kind of experienced in my family recently. We lost my brother in December, and my sister-in-law and niece. And the resolution has been surprisingly strong, even with my mom, and a lot of it is exactly what you said, where you realize you're now put in a position where it's not about you. The only reason you feel sad is because you're sad. You're selfishly sad. Not that there's anything selfish about grieving.
Right.
But when you dwell on that, no matter how much you grieve, it's not going to bring them back. No. But what you can do is help the next person who goes through that, through their process and their journey, and let them know that you're jumping out there with them.
Yes. And that was exactly why I started the foundation was, we had great support from when we were notified to the funeral. I'm not near the base in San Diego or Virginia Beach. Came back home. I'm a widow, almost 29 years. Everybody else went back to their lives. And now my journey was just starting. And it was like, holy crap, this is no fun. And again, I'm not a person to have a pity party and feel sorry for myself. It's like, okay, well, you can't change your circumstances right now and that there's not anybody there. But you can make sure the next person doesn't have to go through this alone. Didn't know it would be so soon. 7 weeks after Mark died, we lost Mike Mansour, who was on task unit bruiser with Mark, who jumped on a grenade to save his teammates and was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. And I didn't know what I was going to do. It's not like I, said I'm going to start a foundation to help people. I just knew I wanted to be there to support that family. And we got there, of course, it's in San Diego where we'd had Mark's funeral, and they put them up in the same hotel that they'd put us up in. Same black cars came to pick them up in the morning. And I was down in the lobby waiting to just give hugs to the family. And the Admiral came over and he said, "How you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm still alive." And he said, "We want you to get in the vehicle with the family." And I'm like, "Oh, no. This is not about Mark. This is not about me. That's not why I'm here. I am here to support this family." And the Admiral almost had a panicked, pleading look as he looked at me. And he said, "Exactly. That's why we want you to go with them, to support them." And I know I reached out to your dad as soon as I found out. And I just said, "I'm so sorry," because I do understand exactly what your dad and your mom and you guys are going through. I'm not a sibling, so I don't understand that side of it. And that's just how God's equipped me to be able to be there for other families. And if I would carry your pain if I could, but, not possible. But to be there, like you said, to say, you're not there alone. If you need me, call me. I'm here. I understand. And like I said, without the pain, I wouldn't have the passion or purpose that I do have. So I guess thanks, Mark, for the pain, maybe. But
Well, it's a direct correlation. You know, it's a good feeling, like it's a warm fuzzy when you're able to see what you're made out of and you realize it's good stuff. My dad always says you never rise to the occasion, you only fall to the level of your training.
mm-hmm.
And that can apply to a gunfight, as many of your boys and myself and my dad are geared towards. But more often than not, you fall to the level of your training when it comes to emotional processing, or as a believer, your Christ-like attributes. When you think about what you're going to do in that situation, you can make the decision, but then you also have to train and prepare and become that person to where you are in the thick of it. You can turn around and emulate Jesus Christ in whatever way that is. And when it's loss or going through pain and hardship, one, you know that he's there to jump out with you. But also,
sometimes he's jumped out and had to carry me. But yes,
but then
he's been there every step of the way.
But then you think, like when it was Gethsemane, the atonement, like he comes out of that and he's alone. Yeah. And the first thing that he does is heal the guard's ear that's trying to take him away to get crucified.
Yeah. Yeah. If anybody knows suffering, if anybody knows aloneness, it's Christ. And, you talked about that you go down to the level of your training. Is that what you said? You don't rise to the occasion? You don't rise to
the occasion. You fall to the level of your training.
And that training was other tragedies and circumstances that I had in my life. Again, that I had a choice to say, I'm going to persevere and not quit. Or, I'm going to give up. And those were those training grounds that each time, maybe not as tough, because losing Mark's the toughest thing I've been through, but listen to Jocko Podcast 368, and I go into detail about a lot of the stuff in the past that you don't want people to know. But I wanted people to see it's not just one thing. It's been several things that I didn't quit by God's strength, not by my own. And oftentimes people will be like, oh, you're such a strong woman. I'm like, no, I'm a weak woman with a strong God. And part of that training was reading the Word every day. That's been a habit in my life since I was 28. And not that there haven't been days where I've missed, but that's my habit and my goal that I work with. If I hadn't done that training, I wouldn't have been prepared to stand on the toughest day of my life when we found out Mark had died. God was still the same God on August 2nd as he was on August 1st. He hadn't changed. My circumstances had drastically changed. But my God had not. And again, if it wasn't for that training and reading and knowing who he was, I wouldn't have been able to stand. And I think it's so spot on that it's what we go through in life, it's what we train for, that will show when we get to the toughest, darkest days. Will we stand or will we fail?
And it's always, like I said, a warm fuzzy when you get to that moment and you see a little bit of what you're made out of and you're like, oh, at least I can see where this is all paying off. Like the years of, being, whether it was, going to church or even if you're not religious, whether it was, identifying yourself with those good virtues, right? You see that manifest in those situations.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, it's interesting because, the mantra of all these soft dudes and all these hard asses is always don't quit.
Yes.
Never quit.
Yeah.
But you find in those times, it's not about not quitting, but it's about knowing how to surrender and the difference between those. Because you have to surrender everything.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's so good because it's not quitting. It's surrendering. And I think, in my story, being a believer, it was 28 when I finally said, okay, time out, God. Everything I've got is yours. I'm laid at your feet. I've messed up my life pretty bad. I know it's not much I got to give you, but what I got left is yours. And I'd been a rebel, kind of felt like it was my time to say, okay, I'm going to put you up here on the shelf. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. I'm like, got it. I'm here. And I always thought he wanted to turn me into this mamsy, pamsy, wimpy, have no backbone. I don't know why I felt that, but once I came to that place where I'm like, okay, make me that mamsy, pamsy, wimpsy, whatever I just said. And he's like, why would I make you that? That's not how I created you. I created you with that spunk. I created with you that desire to not quit or persevere. I want you to be a rebel just for me. I'm like, oh man, I am so stupid. I've resisted you all these years when that's not. And, he did. He never gave up on me. He loved me and still does to this day. I'm sure there's still times he shakes his head like, Deborah Sue, what are you doing? But I do understand that sacrifice, that Christ paid for me and the sacrifice that Mark made so that we can be free every day.
And it's not just and it's what I've been realizing too is it's not just like a institutional freedom, right? Like Mark didn't die. Any service member didn't die to make you free necessarily in America, but
Right.
now you see it's like he, like we said earlier, it's like that his life was meant to give others life. Yeah. It was meant to provide a pathway and for struggling veterans or struggling families who are going through loss and going through hard times when they're having to figure out what it is they're made out of.
Yeah.
And that's never an easy time.
Yeah. I know one of the things that Jocko talks about, and of course, if for those of you that don't know Jocko, he was Mark's task unit commander and has an amazing company called Echelon Front that teaches leadership principles, takes the laws of combat, and then applies them to, how that relates to in your marriage and your relationships, raising children, running your companies, and works with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. But he tells about Mark when he'd be going out on a mission and Jocko would be there standing watching the guys go and, sending them off and greeting them. And he said the turret gunner in the front lead vehicle was the most dangerous place to be. And he compared that to Vietnam when you were the point man. You'd be out there front one and they'd rotate regularly because it was such a dangerous place. And he said time after time he'd see that lead vehicle go out and Mark was there. And he never asked to be rotated. And he always went out with a smile on his face. And he says, I just don't get it how he did that. And I said, I think for him, he knew if anything happened, not that he wanted anything to happen, but he knew if anything happened, he knew he was going. He was secure, And I know he was concerned for some of his teammates that maybe didn't have that, security and relationship with Christ. And I said, well, he knew where he's going if anything did happen. He had peace. When he was going out, he had peace, knowing that if the worst happened for here, it'd be the best day of beginning of his life in heaven. So, yeah, pretty amazing kid, and I was blessed to be his mama.
That is amazing.
And I've inherited a whole bunch of other kids because of him.
Right. And, I think that's another thing, too, that people don't really get is so often, especially the last 20 years, it has been so unlike any other conflict in world history because of the documentation and not just the good documentation of the heroics, but also the bad documentation of like the politics. Yeah. I mean, that is it's hard to look at some of that stuff, especially having either gone there yourself or experienced having been directly affected by those policies and those politics. But, I think especially when you get the warriors, a lot of the sacrifice isn't necessarily made in honor of the land or
100%,
but it's made in honor of
what they love.
They talk about the guy next to him. You like watch Black Hawk Down. He's like, it's about the man next to you. And a lot of guys are they think about the brotherhood, but what that brotherhood really is that respect for what it is and what it means to be the warrior, the guy, like the training, the crucible that you go through to become that in the first place,
right?
And to honor that and those that you stand by, and to sacrifice in order to preserve that. Yeah, because there's not a lot. I mean, it's a dwindling tribe.
It is. It's powerful when you find those that would do that. And like you said, it's not for the land. It's for what they loved and what they stood for. You know, it's for their brothers. I remember when, I don't remember what year it was, when the ISIS flag went back up over Ramadi. And I can't remember the name of our Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, but he got on the news and said, there's no significance to that flag flying up there, you know. And I was like, it was a Friday, and I remember it just as clear as day. And I felt like somebody just sucker punched me. And I'm like, no significance? Are you kidding me right now? My son's blood is on that soil. Don't tell me there's no significance. And I reached out to the Pentagon to speak with him, you know, felt like he owed an apology. And I've never been, again, I always want to respect Mark by what I do and don't want to flip off the handle. And obviously, though, I'd seen his comment, so it's not like I needed to verify what he said. I knew what he said. And I wanted just to speak with him. He, better than anybody else, should know the impact that when he speaks, what that makes. And yes, that is significance. You know, as Ramadi goes, so goes the rest of Iraq. And got a hold of somebody. I said, I need his, you know, address at the Pentagon. Well, they gave me the generic address for all the mail in the Pentagon. I'm like, okay, didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. I know he has his own address that the mail will go directly to him, not through the process. And they said, we can't give that to you. We'll just send it to here. And I'm like, well, I've got a pretty big following, so if you don't want to put me in touch with him, I'll reach out to the media. And so I wrote a letter to him asking for an apology. It was probably more demanding an apology, not asking. But got a call the next morning from his PAO, and he said, I understand that, you know, you're very upset with the comments that he made and you're demanding an apology, and that's probably not going to happen. But we want you to know that he carries all of the veterans, you know, rotates out the names of the fallen ones. I'm like, well, that's awesome. That if he cares that much, he won't have a problem apologizing, because it's not just me. It's every man and woman who's served there. It's every man and woman who's, you know, left a body part behind there. It's every family member who's lost a loved one there. I said, well, I'm sorry, ma'am, that's not going to happen. Well, I did 3 days of national news, and Monday night, as I was getting off one of the Fox shows, I had looked on my Facebook, and there was a message from them because they'd called the office and I wasn't here. And they said, the general's trying to get in touch with you immediately. Please call. And so I called, and they said, well, he's got an apology for you. You'll get a formal, you know, copy of it tomorrow, and he will be calling you. And, you know, so that's one of those things I'm always like, one person can make a difference, you know, when we use our voice to reach out. Obviously, I had some connections with the media to help do that, but people were asking me at that time, do you feel like Mark's sacrifice was in vain? I said, Mark's sacrifice will never be in vain. What he did that day was to save the lives of his teammates. Yes, that trickles down to us in America and the freedoms that we have, but he did that day to save his teammates, and that will never be in vain, you know.
It's a big deal.
It's a huge deal, huge deal. So like you said, it wasn't for the land, you know, it was for those guys that...
It's for the boys.
Yeah, that are now my adopted boys. Adopted, inherited, but yeah, I'm blessed to have them in my life.
And we talked about this earlier too, how, especially in that exact circumstance, how significant that group was. I mean, you have guys who've gone on to be astronauts and doctors and...
Okay, wait, we're talking about the same guy there.
Yeah. Astronaut, doctor,
so that would be
SEAL.
Johnny Kim. And I think he may be 38 now, but he's not 37 or 38. And he was one of the medics with Charlie Platoon. He'd left that day with Ryan. So he wasn't there when Mark was killed, but he was in the hospital with Ryan. Got out, went to Harvard. Well, he's still in the Navy. Went through their program to become a doctor at Harvard. And while he was at Harvard, got picked up to be an astronaut and went through the astronaut select program and did make it through there. And I don't know which next mission he's going to be on. And then recently has got his pilot's license to fly helicopters. So little underachiever there, Johnny Kim. Right. And he has 3 children. So it's not like he's single. Yeah.
And then you have the corporate CEOs that have all come out of that group.
Leif Babin and Jocko, you know, started Echelon Front, a huge leadership company that if you have not read any of their books, we sell them all on our website, and then that helps support our programs. But their company literally is changing the world with what they're doing in leadership, not in just our, corporations and companies, but marriages that have been saved. It's almost like a Dr. Phil show or something. Jocko's going to laugh if he hears that. But, the marriages that have been restored, in parenting your children, these are 4 basic, easy principles that relate to everything that we do in life. And the way that they make their presentations is just absolutely phenomenal. We've got Kevin Lace that we talked about, who opened Trident Performance Medicine, is working there. We've got Bobby Holland, who's in Ireland today. He started his own company doing golf clothing and things there, but he's going through caddy school in Ireland for a month. Another one just got out and has started his own company. Another one has an investment company. I mean, holy cow.
I mean, you got Eli. He's been on the show, and he's now
in Congress. Yes.
He also has a multi-million-dollar company.
Yep. Well, he did sell bottle breachers.
Yeah,
yes.
He had bottle breachers and whatnot.
So, but yeah, these guys are just, if anybody could have sat back and enjoyed retirement, what these guys did in combat, they deserve it. But yet they're like, that's not who I am. That's not what I'm going to do. Come on, let's keep changing the world.
Right.
And so I'm so proud of all these guys.
Well, I really think it comes down to, one, it's a testament to what good leadership can do. Mm-hmm. And I've been very I've been very particular to maintain this approach in most of my relationships, and particularly in the last 2 months of my marriage, like that extreme ownership. Mm-hmm. Pretty much everything is your fault, and you need to figure out how to fix it and what you can need to do better. Because if it's like, it could be the most menial thing, or something that's completely not your fault, but
it is.
How do you swallow it and say, this is my fault? How do I prevent this?
But I don't know that it's just swallowing it. There usually is something that you look at that and you're like, oh, I didn't communicate to my wife how important this was to get this done in this time or in this fashion, or why we're doing this, or, to my children. It really is, when you look back at most circumstances, whether it's up the chain or down the chain, there's something that you're doing, and communication is so important. I wish I would have learned when I was younger, communication, how important that is. I had a preschool and kindergarten for 15 years, so I did a lot reading about learning styles and, how kids learn, and that comes into the picture. When I communicate to you, if you're a visual learner and I do it auditory, you're not going to get it as well. If we can use every one of the 5 senses, then 100% chance of getting that. But it's not just their learning style. It's their birth order. It's, their love language. There's so many things. No wonder it's so hard to communicate to people. And it's my responsibility as a communicator to communicate in the way that you receive it. It's easy for me to tell you in the way I receive it, the way I understand it, because that's me. But so that means I've got to take time and build relationship capital into you to get to know you, what you do like, what things relate to, how you learn, so that when I communicate to you and talk about complication, well, marriage, that'd be pretty important to do that. And we don't. We communicate in the way. Why don't they understand the way I understand? Right. And so you've got to step back, detach from your emotions, think about it, and then, make those communications. There isn't anything in life that's worth standing your ground to prove you're right. That's probably your ego that's getting in the way there a little bit. Trust me, I've been there, done that. But there's so many, like I said, so many of these things they teach that are just the best leadership training I've ever seen in my life. I don't say that just because they're my boys, but I've read a lot of, leadership books, done lots of different training, and there's nothing like the way and the principles aren't any different. It's like they said on a podcast today, their online training that they do every week. This isn't anything new. We don't try to make this secret. We put it in books. We teach it all the time. And yet each call, somebody's got a question that comes back to those things. So it's not as naturally easy. But when you purpose to do those 4 things and think about it, oh my gosh, it changes so much, so much.
Do you think it's one of the things that's really helped you with your foundation in reaching out to these families and veterans? That's made you successful with that?
I think so. Obviously, the first success goes to what God's done, for me and given me and the connections He's made. But I think that is because it's so relatable. So many of the struggles we have is our ego gets in the way, and we've got to put that aside. And, for me, a lot of foundations, you see those egos in the leadership get in the way, and that it gets to be about them, not about the mission, and they lose the focus of the mission. So for me, that keeps me focused on, this is not about me. I don't care if we can partner with somebody else and somebody else gets the credit for it, as long as the end goal is getting help to our veterans, supporting our Gold Star families. I don't care who gets the credit, and so that takes, putting your ego to the side to be able to do that, to be able to see that in our veterans when they're struggling sometimes. And so lots of times it can be that ego that gets in the way. And so, you can give them the kick, gently give them that kick in the butt to say, have you thought about this? And asking those questions.
Right.
Instead of just stating a fact to your wife.
Yeah.
So, honey, what do you think we should do about this? Or how should we handle this? Or, what could have I done differently, to resolve this before? Or did I not communicate well? Or, and then say, this is on me, but not just, oh, my bad. And then go on and live life. It's like, I'm sorry. And this is what I'm going to do. So next time this doesn't happen again. Right. Moving forward, here's how I'm going to change things. And I think that just, you see the walls come tumbling down, when you're ready to say, hey, I'm sorry, honey, I should have communicated better to you. I did a terrible job. Next time I'll make sure, or if I put you in a rush, next time I'll make sure I give you a half an hour heads up that, we're getting ready to leave, or, if that's what the circumstance or.
See, I've never lived with a woman or cohabitated. I
right.
mean, I grew up with my sister and my mom, but that's so different than, going from being a bachelor,
sure,
living in the barracks and then, getting out of the army and now having a woman and a 2-year-old daughter that
yes.
I'm like handling, getting.
He's like, where's the testosterone around here?
I know, right? It's in that 2-year-old. She bounces off the walls like nobody's business.
She's so cute. She's so cute.
But,
your wife's beautiful too. So.
Oh, thank you very much. She's going to like it when she listens to this. But I think a lot of it too is, with those leadership lessons, and also with that, it's like a teach a man to fish kind of thing. If you can, anybody can get their ass beat.
Yeah.
But if you can teach someone to refine themselves, they'll never stop progressing.
And what good does it do if we're in an argument and I go all defensive on you? What are you going to do?
Right.
You're going to come defensive back at me, So, okay, tear those walls down. Again, detach from the emotions. So often we respond in the, moment, and that's where the anger comes. And things always look way worse than they are, that if we just take a moment, and I've learned to, if I don't get that way very often, but if I do, I will actually step back. I'll just pause for a moment, step back. That's a reminder. Detach from your emotions. This is not as bad as it looks right now. And I'll do, some deep breathing and just calm down for a minute. And then remember, what's the end goal of this? Is this right. So I can win and say, see, I told you so? No, it's about those relationships, and building that relationship capital is so, so, so important. So then when you need to come back, you've got those relationships established when you need help or, need to call in a favor, those relationships are so important.
It's interesting when you look at the concept model for the extreme ownership style of leadership. Compare it to, you're extremely well plugged into the SEAL community and the special operations community, but have you seen any of those these leadership courses where there'll be a couple guys who used to have tridents, and they'll invite
and it's all about them?
Well, and they just start beating these dudes down and hosing them down and running around with sledgehammers and crawling through the mud and the sand, and they're just beating them down, and they're yelling at them, and they call it a leadership course.
Well, and it would depend on why you're doing that. Are you trying to put them in stressful situations and see how they respond? Because we'll all respond way different in a stressful situation. We were talking about that earlier. When you're, reading something, or you're on the firing range here, and you're practicing something, it's a whole lot different than if you're being fired on, or RPGs or IEDs are blowing up, next to you what your thinking process is. It's easy to be the armchair quarterback when you're not in the middle of it.
Right.
But put people in stressful situations. See how do they respond, when you're like, oh my gosh, why? No, no, same thing. Detach from your emotions, step back, look around, evaluate the situation, see what's up. So, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. But there is definitely a whole different level of, and it comes back to the ego. Those, that have had tridents that are out there because this is all about me. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things Jocko and Leif say. It's about you. Or how did they say that? Now I need to get this wrong. It's not about you, but it's on you. So this is your responsibility. It's on me, but it's not about you.
Yeah.
And it's so hard because, that's that little ego on our shoulder wants to tell us that's my right. Somebody should treat me better. They just should be, and that's when you step back and go, okay, wait a minute.
And, it's it's exactly just, it's that teaching a man how to refine himself over just trying to having a dude come up to you and say like, hey, make me like hammer me into it, like forge me into something I'm not right now.
Yeah.
That'll never happen.
Yeah. Well, we could try. Can I start beating on you right now?
You'd have to, you get worn out fast.
I probably would, yes. There'd be a couple punches. I'm like, never mind.
I know. I think my mom did that one time when I was like 16. I must have mouthed off or something. And she like punched me in the arm and she got even more mad because it hurt her hand more than it hurt my arm.
Doggone you, look what you did to my hand now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
But that's like, I used to tell Mark, well, at least let me think I can then.
Is there do you guys see a curve in your veteran treatment when it comes to curbing that ego?
Yeah, because I think those that still are really struggling with their ego are the place where they can't admit they've got a problem. So I think most of them, by the time we get them, that ego has kind of gone away and they've struggled long enough to think they can fix it themselves where they realize they can't. So I think most of those that we do get, that's probably gone by the wayside at that point. Not that they didn't have it. But, if you're listening and you're struggling and your ego is telling you don't need help, and you can fix this, might want to knock that ego off your shoulder. Give us a call.
I mean, that's 90% of the battle right there.
For all of us, no matter what we're struggling with, whether we've been to combat or not. Yeah. So when you put that ego in check, yeah.
And it's not even about, I think a lot of guys too, they have this problem where they shame themselves out of it. Like, I wasn't a Navy SEAL, so I'm not worth. I'm not.
Or there's people that are worse than me.
There are people that are worse than me.
I hear that often. I'm like, well, how are you going to be a good leader then if you're somebody calls you and they want help, and you're struggling with the same thing and you didn't go get help? How's that somebody going to say, oh, that's wise advice? Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Well, it's like in the service where you'd have some, and I was a victim and I was on both ends of this. But you have like a senior guy who their entire experience was just like suffer in silence. Nobody cares about your problems. Like facilitating your problems in any way, shape, or form right now is not mission critical. So why are you talking about it? Yeah. Shut up.
Yeah. Why are your lips moving?
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's so many dudes, young guys that it starts with shin splints.
Yeah.
It starts with, plantar fasciitis, and then it turns into, well, now your knees don't have cartilage. Now it turns into your back is getting fused. Now it turns into like surgery after surgery and millions of dollars of rehab and, and all it takes is catching it at the front end and just being able to, one, check your ego like we talked, and also being able to say like, yeah, you know what? I may just be somebody, and it doesn't even have to be in a military capacity, like my grandpa, he was an iron worker. He did structural steel.
Yeah, that's some hard work.
It'll beat you down and keep you there. Yeah. And, it's like same mentality, just deal with it. But when you don't deal with it, you're creating such bigger problems
and
later
it just
on.
piles on top, on top, on top. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like my my wife says I got real soft feet, like they're just like
Right.
smooth and soft. But that was one of the things that I was sure to take care of, like going into the military and like
Yep.
all these different selections, and pipelines, and deployments, and having good socks, having good boots, and
Yeah.
getting a pedicure every now and then.
Yep. Well, and that goes back to that perfect example of our veterans that are struggling, whether it's depression, whether it's post-traumatic stress, whether it's traumatic brain injury, post-concussive syndrome. There's things that you can do to help that. You can eat better. You've got control over that. You can exercise, depending on the level of, the severity of some of those injuries. 3.5 years ago, I fell down my steps and both knees on the tile. I was having a Nerf gun war with my grandkids. And I dislocated both kneecaps. Oh my gosh. I had all my kids' natural childbirth, so I have a really high pain tolerance.
Wow.
Holy cow. I was in so much pain. And of course, my 5 grandkids, who then would have been me, it was probably 2. And they're like, they've never seen me cry for physical pain. They may have seen me emotionally, a time or two over Marc crying. I'm not a big crier, but they've never seen me physical pain when I get hurt. I'm like, just like, ugh. And I was crying, and they're like, Grandma, what do we do? What do we do? Should we call the ambulance? I'm like, no, give me a minute. And it was bad. I mean, I was on crutches, and it was so painful. And I barely could even make it up the stairs for a long time. And finally, I just started walking, a little bit here, a little bit there. I can't take 5 miles all at once because the knees still swell a little bit. But, man, I am in such better health just because I chose to purpose to do that and not let that conquer me. And so, our veterans can help themselves by, first starting to eat healthy, exercise, get away from the alcohol. Alcohol is not your friend. I totally get it in the military community. We've lost somebody, we go do shots. We're celebrating, let's go to the bar. Let's, rounds for everybody. I'm tired, let's go to the bar. And the first couple drinks, you feel better. You maybe, upbeat, but it's a depressant. After you've had several, it leads you on a downward spiral. And think of the stupid choices that we make when we're drunk. Our judgment doesn't work well. And the next day we're like, I did what? Or you're in jail, because you feel a little too bold when somebody says the wrong thing and your ego again gets in the way. They're not going to talk to me that way. And, or self-medicating. Get away from those things. Get the stinking thinking out of your brain. Those negative thoughts, replace them with something positive and good. Lots of times they're even lies. It's not the truth of who you really are or what's going on. And, then call us so we can help you and get some of that physical healing too. But you need to be responsible and you need to be committed to making life changes that are going to help get you well. So good on you that you made sure your feet stayed soft for your wife.
Now, when it comes to Gold Star families, what are things that they could do if they are either just now going through it or have been going through it? What are ways that they can do? What is something that they can do directly to affect either how they're feeling or how to get them pull themselves?
And I think that's something, whether you're a Gold Star family or loss in general, you need to not avoid that. I've seen people get busy and do things just so they didn't have to deal with the grief. And you don't get to the healthier side that way. You can't avoid it. You can't go under it, around it, over it. You got to go smack dab through the middle of it, and that's painful. But when you get to the healthier side of it, there is a release. You learn ways to cope. You learn ways to manage the grief. You take those tough days of, the day they died, the anniversary of those, their birth dates, the holidays, when they're not there with you, and plan ahead things to do to honor them. I am so blessed by Marc's last letter home where he said, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or meal or tank of gas? So on those difficult days, I go do that. I go over to Luke Air Force Base. If I'm traveling and I'm out somewhere else, I go find a base and I go buy those things for our veterans or Gold Star families. And I'm honoring Mark, I just basically feel him give me a high five. Awesome job, Mom. And it's so cool when you're doing stuff like that and you like, hey, let me buy for your coffee, and oftentimes on the base, like, no, ma'am, thank you, I'm good. I'm like, no, my son was the first Navy SEAL that was killed in Iraq, and he challenged me to do this. And they're like, oh, yes, ma'am. Or the times, or gas now, and it's $100 to fill the tank. And they're like, I got a SUV. Are you sure you want to fill my? I said, yes, ma'am, I do, That's actually one of the gals that applied for the job, Tracy, our new admin assistant, her husband, Ben, was actually killed in Afghanistan, and I'd stopped when I saw her Gold Star plate just to thank her, and that was several years ago, but ended up, she's working for us now, and then had another one of the applicants for that was one who I'd bought the tank of gas for on Luke Air Force Base. She ended up getting activated and called back up, but, to be able to do those things is really rewarding. I think that, those things that I talked about earlier, wake up in the morning, before your feet hit the ground, find one thing to be grateful for. Make sure you're exercising every day, and then go serve somebody else. The beginning stages of grief are hard. You find yourself crying and trying to accept it. I think God purposely keeps us numb in the beginning, because I think we'd all go find some cliff to jump off of if we totally embraced that and, accepted it the moment we found out. I felt like, and I've read lots of books, the 4th month after the loss gets worse. And I remember that happening with my husband when he died. And I'm like, okay, we're all falling apart here, guys. We're going to go to this class. And it was Grief Release was the name of it. And we got there, and there were people that had lost a parent, 10 years before that were, older, not little kids, and couldn't get out of bed in the morning. And I'm like, oh, guys, we're okay. We're doing fine. I wrote in my journal 2 weeks after he died, what's wrong with me? Why am I still crying? Why have things not gone back to normal? Grief is unique to each individual, depending on those relationships, depending on if there was separation, and the relationships were dissected. That makes a difference. And there's no right or wrong way to grieve. You have to do what's right for you. Some people like pictures up of the fallen, some don't. It's too painful to look at those. Lots of times in marriages, you'll find that they're opposite there. So then that's hard on marriages, because you've always been there for the other one when they're hurting. Well, now you're both hurting, and you both expect each other to be there for you. Well, they can't. They're hurting, Some want to talk about it, some don't want to talk about it. So you got to find, what's right for you, and just keep moving through it. They talk about books that there's 7 stages of grief. I don't know who wrote those, but I don't think they lost anybody close to them. That may work for some people, but they're, having lost a husband and a son. I didn't go through all those different stages. I was never angry, when Mark died. I was when my husband took his life. I thought that was pretty selfish thing to do at the time. But just keep pushing forward, make sure you've got your swim buddy there, even on that one, on your back, so when you feel like you don't feel like you're going to, be able to push through it, that you got someone to call and that's there. And I always tell people that if you know someone, just be there. If they've lost somebody, just be there. Don't worry about what you got to say, what you don't have to say. Should I talk about them? Should I not talk about them? If they want to talk about them, that person's going to start talking about them, but just having somebody there so you don't have to go through that alone. I think that's so crucial.
So for veterans, Gold Star families, people dealing with loss, where can they find you, find your foundation, get help?
You bet. So online, our website is Americas, AMERICAS. Sometimes it sounds like something different when I say that, but Mighty Warriors, again with an S on the end, .org is our website. Our phone number is 623-537-5322. And we would love to be able to support you, to help you, to encourage you. If it's something that we can't do for you, we try to connect you with, another charity that would be able to support in whatever that you need. But I'm so proud of all you, Kate, and every other, my sons, every man and woman who served in our military and given me the freedoms that I enjoy every day. And I won't ever take that for granted. So Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on the show.
You bet.
That was great.
You bet.
Thank you for listening. This has been the Fear Not Do Right podcast. I'm your host, Kate Lamb. If you want to support the show, go to fearnotdoright.com. We got merch for you, and you can find us online at fearnotdoright.com or on social media at Fear Not Do Right.